Welcome everybody. I'll start with the land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we are undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous people, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples today. So with that, we are officially open. I'd like to start out by welcoming our new member. Drew, nice to have you on board. I know I've spent a little bit of time with Drew, and I know Lisa spent some time with Drew, so hopefully we're getting you up the curve. You're fortunate that we have a relatively light agenda here for this meeting. We only have one approval to go through, and pretty straightforward on the financial front, but we'll go through all that. So I'm very hopeful that we can complete this in a timely way today. So with that, is there any declarations of conflict of interest from anyone? Not, then I'm going to go to the consent agenda and turn over to the highlights of the key messages. So over to you, Lisa, and the team.
Wait, Kevin, I think we have to approve the meeting agenda. We need a motion.
Oh, you're right. Can I have a motion to approve the committee? Thanks, Jeannie.
I'll move it.
Okay.
I'll second it. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Now to the consent agenda. You there, Lisa?
I am, and thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everyone, and welcome, Drew, to the Farm Committee. So I'm happy to provide a few brief highlights of what is being covered in the agenda for this meeting of the Finance Audit Risk Management Committee today. As Kevin mentioned, we just have one approval item, which is the appointment of the corporation's external auditors, and that's under item number 7. And then the remaining of the agenda is for information and discussion. It includes our regular quarterly reporting, as well as a few special reports on some initiatives, such as the new volunteer initiative we're looking to launch under item 5, which George will speak to, as well as an update on our cybersecurity risk profile, which is under item 9B. And then we have Ian McMillan, our Executive Director of Philanthropy, who's going to talk and present to the philanthropy planning study, which is item number 10. So with that, Kevin, I'll just turn it back to you briefly for the review of the minutes from the last meeting.
Yep. I take it everyone's seen these minutes. Is there any comments? I think we do need to approve these minutes, do we not?
Yes.
Any comments on the minutes?
None from me. No.
They look
Okay.
fine to me,
Yep.
Kevin.
Okay, motion to approve those, please.
Happy to move.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? So those are approved. Thank you. Back to you, Lisa.
Great. Thanks. So in terms of the macro dashboard, this is a dashboard that reports on the overall health of 3 key areas of interest to the Farm Committee, namely the corporate plan, our areas of finance and administration, and capital projects. And those of you who were at the last meeting in May will recall that we did talk about reviewing the thresholds for which we consider something to be green, being substantially in line with plan, amber being a caution, or red being a concern in the dashboard. And in particular, we felt that the criteria was not necessarily consistent with that used by our government partners. So we've since taken a look at this, and we have revised the thresholds slightly downwards to be a bit more realistic in terms of our historical performance, as well as more in line with our government stakeholders, in particular the City of Toronto, and how they report on performance for capital project budgets. So it should be noted that these thresholds really just apply to the quantitative aspects of the dashboard. So for primarily areas such as expenditure budget, revenues, key deliverables, and KPIs. And those are all components of our corporate plan. So just to highlight what the changes are, green is now for performance of 70% or higher, and that was previously 80 or higher. Amber is now 50 to 69%. Previously that was 70 to 80. and red is now below 50%, previously 70%. So if you move to the next slide, Charmaine. So incorporating these new thresholds after the first quarter of the fiscal year, this dashboard reflects where we're at. So you'll see for the 2021-22 corporate plan, everything is green and tracking substantially in accordance with plan, with the exception of revenues, which is amber, simply due to the timing of certain land sale revenues that have shifted from the end of this current fiscal year to the beginning of the following fiscal year, which is purely a timing reason. And I should note that we do have sufficient cash flow to bridge that slight timing difference. From a finance and admin perspective there, those 4 areas, 4 categories, we have financial reporting compliance, which is about our interim quarterly financial statements, as well as our annual financial statements preparation. That's all in order. We have a pie on internal audit, and that is all in line. That's all about our performance of addressing outstanding recommendations related to audit. We have one on liquidity, and that's also green. And we have separate dashboards on all of these items. And then enterprise risk management is also green. And I can touch on these areas in more detail when we get to those dashboards. And then finally, capital projects, you'll see that there's just one area there that's amber or yellow, which is caution. And that does relate to the elevated cost and schedule risk for the Portland's Flood Protection Project, which our Chief Project Officer, David Custerin, will talk about shortly in the agenda. Was there any questions on this high-level dashboard at this time? If not, I'll move to the Enterprise Risk Management Dashboard, Charmaine, which I think is a couple of pages away. So for the Enterprise Risk Management Dashboard, this presents Waterfront's top 10 risks. We actually have a risk register, an enterprise risk register with 20 risks on it. So this reflects the top 10 risks. And it shows what the current score is this current quarter ending Q1 versus the previous quarter, Q4 of last year. And you'll see the profile is fairly similar. I would note the first risk, which is business continuity. Last quarter, it shows 2 yellows being medium risk, 12 and 12. The inherent risk score should actually be 20, the same as what it is this year, and should be red. That was just a typo. So I just wanted to highlight that. What has happened, though, there's 2 things to note for this, this dashboard. First is that the business continuity risk, the residual risk score, last quarter we scored that as a 12 as a medium. We've elevated that slightly this quarter in terms of it now being red, a score of a 15. And that's really about the impact side of the continuation of the global pandemic. While we have been able to largely continue our projects without significant interruption, we do feel that there's the unknowns related to the ongoing pandemic on staff and the human element. So we've reflected that as a high risk at this time. And then the second note on this dashboard is that we've pulled cybersecurity out, which was previously under business continuity, as its own separate risk, because we do maintain a separate risk register for cybersecurity, and it's a hot topic of focus. So we felt that it was prudent to have it as a separate risk on this dashboard as well. And we'll talk about that risk further in the closed session. Any questions at all on this dashboard? If not, Charmaine, we can move to the audit dashboard.
Great.
So the audit dashboard shows the overall audits that have been completed, that are underway or planned over a 3-year time horizon, as well as on the right-hand side there, the status of any outstanding audit recommendations. Attached to this is a confidential attachment that shows the status of all the audit recommendations that have not yet been implemented, and the status of those and the timing of those. Everything is generally in line with our plan in terms of implementation. We do have one internal audit / review that's underway, And we have an update planned later in the agenda, and Veronica from MMP is here to also speak to that. So there's nothing other really that I'd like to highlight about this at this time, unless anyone else has any questions.
No, I think we're good there, Lisa. Keep moving. Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so the next dashboard is on liquidity and cash flow. And here we provide a forecast of our cash balance for the next 5 years, and the consolidated cash balance is the red line. So, sorry, the purple line. And overall, you'll see a strong consolidated forecast cash balance with no requirement to borrow for the next 3 years until 2024. That said, on an individual project basis, we do have cash flow timing differences where we do need to spend in advance of realizing revenues, and that's what's reflected in the hashed red area of the graph. And we track these projects that need funding in advance or cash flow in advance of their ultimate funding, the amounts, the interim funding sources that we use, and then the ultimate funding sources, and we track that and report that for information on the next slide. And what we in particular do is we categorize any temporary use of unspent government funding versus unspent Waterfront Toronto revenues as notional external borrowing, and that's currently at 25 million. So, Charmaine, if you just want to move to the next slide. That's currently at 25 million, where we're
Lisa, sorry, Jeannie has a question.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Oh, Lisa, I can wait till you're done.
Okay, sure. And then currently we have a notional borrowing of 25 million. We are expecting upward pressure of that up to 70 million or so in the fourth quarter of this year. And that's the gray area of the middle pies on this, or the donuts on this slide. And so overall, while we are able to maintain a positive consolidated cash balance, and why we don't need to draw down on our line of credit externally, we track this notional borrowing against what our external government borrowing consent limit is of 40 million. And as the committee is aware, we made a formal request to governments in April to increase the limit to 90 million as a result of this upward pressure, in addition to also deferring some costs. So our goal does remain to increase our borrowing authority this fiscal year, and we are on track to achieve that. Jeannie?
Thanks, Lisa. I had a question regarding the extension of the credit facility. I know the application, or we've submitted our kind of application, and what's the status and timing of that?
So all three orders of government are completing their due diligence on Waterfront Toronto's request to increase it to 90 million right now. Both the federal and provincial governments, federal pending the election results of course, and that, are planning for a fall Treasury Board submission for the request because Treasury Board approval is required. The City of Toronto requires City Council approval, and that's on track for November 9th council meeting, that request. And prior to that is an executive committee meeting to also review it. So we're hopeful by the end of this calendar year that we will have secured the approvals.
If I can just add to that, KPMG in their strategic review for the three levels of government have identified this as an important issue that the governments need to address.
Okay, so you don't see any risk with the elections or anything unexpected?
No, we don't. We don't, because the staff at the federal level are continuing to do the due diligence, and we understand that governments are generally on board with their request, subject to the outcome of all of the due diligence. But it's definitely proceeding, and there's a lot of good work being done to support and answer the questions that are being asked by the three governments.
Great, thank you. And Kevin, I have another question, but maybe we'll let Drew go first.
Sure.
Thanks, Jeannie, and I'll just bounce off that. I'm just wondering about history, Lisa. I'm trying to remember. I should remember this. Has it ever been increased before? I'm not in my memory.
So we didn't used to have a borrowing consent at all until 2015, Drew. So in 2015, that's when we started relying on some land sale revenues, and they're obviously a bit lumpy in terms of the timing. So we had a requirement to borrow in 2015, and we were successful. I think it was after 2 years of a process of securing a $40 million borrowing consent, which we then turned into a line of credit with our bankers at CIBC. And it was only for a 5-year term. It wasn't indefinite, and so that 5-year term actually came up this past year, and we were successful in extending the term. However, at the time, governments felt that it was prudent not to increase the limit, or not in order to get the term increase approved on a timely basis, that we just go for the term and then we revisit the limit at a future date, which is what we're doing now.
Just doing now. Okay, I should remember that. Okay, great.
And Lisa, I guess just to point out, one of the challenges is governments are relying more and more on the work being done before we get their allocations, and that presents a cash flow challenge, right? So
that's right. Yeah. George is referring to the funding model currently being a project-based funding model, but in order to get project funding, we have to incur costs of due diligence to figure out how much the projects are going to cost and how long they're going to take, and the risks and those kinds of things.
And Lisa, a couple of points I wanted to make on this. Well, I believe that we've been focusing on getting the approval here, but I believe if the land sales go through on Keysight as we think, we're not going to be actually drawing down on this anytime soon, if at all, are we? And second part, will the governments, now that we have this, actually even slow down their allocations, their timing even further to us, and force us to rely on it?
To be honest, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, you know what, Kevin, we're kind of relying on those land sales to actually fund some of the infrastructure that David's team will have to do on those properties. So the Keysight land sales are kind of spoken to for the majority of it, and then there are other corporate and other pressures that we have to pay off. And Lisa, did you want to add?
I just wanted to say it's also about making sure we have fiscal flexibility, because we are we're relying on government funding, and the timing of the land sale revenues, it just makes good business sense to have a fallback in case there's any interruption in the government funding, which that has happened in the past. So it's really an insurance, really, more than anything, to have it available if we so need it. And we're also going through the procurement for the land sales, and it also depends on the developers in terms of the timing of when the land sales will be paid. There may be some differences or some requests in terms of timing that's different from our assumptions.
Can I just add, Kevin, remember with the Keysight land sales, I mean, assuming it happens when it's forecasted to, remember, we've already pre-spent $90 million of the money we're going to get that we need to put back to other areas, because you know how we're kind of borrowing from other areas in the cupboard to pay for other stuff. But yeah, Lisa, I had a question regarding Keysight. So, or I don't know if Meg's on the line, just the timing is showing Q1 22-23, which is, I guess, April to June of 2022. Is that pretty realistic? Is that the latest kind of forecasted timing to be able to conclude agreements with whoever the winning proponent will be?
To be honest, Jeannie, it could be as late as September 2022, like if we're going to be very conservative. We don't know really until we close on the.
And can our cash flow, and I guess you've modeled the cash flow in a worst case scenario?
We have. So
and we're still okay, assuming we get the extension of our credit facility?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Second question, sorry if that's okay. Does this include any of the signature projects or money we need to pre-spend? Because I know we'll talk about Ian's the philanthropy piece later, but is this excluding any of that?
So it includes a little bit of the seed capital related to the signature projects, because we did identify 15 million of Keysight land sale revenues as being seed capital towards the signature project. So we haven't actually spent any. We haven't pre-spent. We may have spent a little, and Marianne can clarify in terms of how much we've spent of that 15 million, if any. I have a feeling we haven't spent any yet.
Yeah, I would say it is very little, right? Because we would have just done some design work on the destination playground that we spent money on, and quite frankly, hiring Ian and whatever team we have to hire up for the fundraising. So not very much.
Yeah, we had already had 5 million that we'd realised from other land sale revenues that we'd been using for the signature projects and the fundraising action plan. So that I think there's still a little bit of a balance left. So we haven't. Yeah, the intention is not to start borrowing against revenues we haven't even secured for the signature projects. We've just got this 15 million from Keysight that we've dedicated or identified.
Okay, sorry, one last question, Kevin, if that's okay. It was touched on a bit earlier about, you know, there's a lot of the governments are funding by project. As Waterfront Toronto, for example, and the Lakeshore bridge work, the David and team, that we're kind of taking that on, although the city's going to be paying for it. And does your cash flow take that into account where, you know, they may be delayed in providing us with the money that they should at the time, so we actually need to fund that to keep the work going? Is that all kind of contingent on this increase in credit facility to 90 million, and will that cover us?
It will cover us, and yes, the 90 million covers that risk because that project is being funded on a just-in-time funding basis.
Which, you know, we can't rely on the city, because if they don't give us the money, we still have to keep the work going. Okay, and so really it's the 90 million, that's the key right now.
It is.
We got to get that approved before the end of this year.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks,
Lisa, I just checked. Yeah, the one for the signature, it's very little.
Okay, thanks, Marianne.
Okay, other questions there? Okay, where are we on to the next here, Lisa?
Yeah, I think we're on to the interim financial statements. Charlene, if you want to move there. I'm actually going to ask my colleague, Sampata Chandane, who's our Director of Financial Management, to provide a few brief highlights of our interim financial statements. Sampata, are you there? Okay, there you are.
Welcome, Sampata.
I am. Thank you so much, Lisa. And good morning, everybody. So what I'm presenting over here is the interim results for the first quarter ended June 30th, 2021. So this is a 3-month period from April to June 2021. If we can just, I'm going to cover some key components of the statement of financial position and then some of the key components in the statement of financial activities, just to give you a flavor of the key items that are covered in these statements. So Charmaine, if you can just turn to page 39 of the material. So if you can see the first component of, we're looking at the statement of financial position as of June 30th, 2021. The first component is cash. If you look at the level of cash, 73 million, which is very consistent with the amount of working capital that we are maintaining for the Portland's working capital, for the Portland's project. We are typically maintaining about 3 months of working capital for the project. Our average expenses for the project is roughly around 25 to 30 million. So this cash is consistent with the working capital requirements for the project. The next item is receivables. You see receivables of 58 million over there. And most of these receivables are comprised of the federal claims that we had put for the Portland's project prior to June 30th. Almost 46 million of that relates to the Portland's claims. And we have realized that 46 million in August 2021. Rest of the receivables pertain to, you know, all receivables with the or receivables from the City of Toronto under various delivery agreements for the Bentway project, Phase 1B project, and Bentway Bridge project, and the like. And there's also some HST receivable, which is roughly about 5 to 6 million, which is consistent with 2 months of HST receivable for the corporation. So that's the major item under the assets. The next major item under the assets is the assets under development. And really this, if you look at the difference between the assets under development as of March 2021 versus June 2021, that's really the expenditures that we have incurred during the quarter, which totals up to 63 million. This is the component of the expenditures that we are capitalizing to the statement of financial position. And these expenditures basically are assets which Waterfront Toronto has a beneficial or actual ownership during the construction phase, and they will be eventually transferred to the respective governments or sold to the developers. And the second component of the expenditures in the statement is in the statement of financial activities, which I'll cover when we go to the next page. But before I move there, there is one other item that I want to discuss is the deferred contributions. If you look at the deferred contributions and the current liabilities, they're currently at 124.9 million, which is 125 million approximately. And these deferred contributions really represent the contributions that we've received, but we have not yet spent on projects. A major component of that deferred contribution is really the Portlands project. Almost 100 million of that 125 million pertains to the Portlands project, which is again in line with the working capital that we are requiring or we are maintaining for the project, which is 3 months working capital. If we can just turn to page 40 of the material, which is the next one, which is the statement of financial activities. Our revenues for the 3-month period are about 48 million. And those are contributions for the Portland projects. Again, this is the 45 million from the Government of Canada, which we discussed under receivables. This we realized in August of 2021. This revenues are totally dependent upon the timing of expenditures. The timing of expenditures dictates how we put the claims into the governments. And as of June 30th, these were receivable and they have been realized since. We've got some City of Toronto contributions, 3 million. Again, these are for the York Street project and Bentway Phase 1B project. If we move down to the expenses, we see 4.7 million in expenditure. When I was discussing the statement of financial position, I said that we've spent a total of 69 million, of which a major portion of almost 64 million is capitalized. And the 4.7 million is what we expense through our statement of financial activities. And these really pertain to waterfront-wide initiatives, design review panel expenses, some signature projects, as well as East Bayfront LRT, where we, in case of signature projects, which there are no real assets right now in place and there's no funding. So we choose to expense these projects. And there are also some projects for which we've already handed over the assets to the City of Toronto, and we are expensing the post handover expenses like Queen's Quay, etc. There's one last item that I would like to discuss, which is in the notes to the financial statements. And if we can just turn to page number 46 of the material. This is very relevant. This item is very relevant considering that we just discussed the cash flow, and we'll be able to tie this note very easily to the cash flow discussion that we just had. If you look at note 12B of the material on page 46, it shows really the unrestricted deficit as of date, which is 28 million. And this ties into the internal borrowing that we just discussed a while ago, that Lisa discussed, and while discussing the cash flow position. These are internal borrowing for the projects, and these are totally depending upon the timing of the projects. Overall, we are in a very comfortable cash flow position, but because of the timing of expenditures, we are in a deficit position at the moment. But this position will reverse when we get the Keysight or the land sale revenues later during the year, some of it, the Bayside revenues later during the year, and the Keysight revenues in the next fiscal year, in the first or the second quarter of the next fiscal year. So these are the key items that I wanted to discuss, but I am willing to take any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Sampata. Any questions on the financial statements?
I don't have any. They were very clear. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, good job again, team. Okay. What am I missing? Lisa, are we off to David now on the
Yeah.
plan? Okay.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So Kevin, excuse me, I would like to turn it over to Julius to do the next bits. And the reason for that is I'm actually just dialing into the city's Infrastructure and Environment Committee. We have an item on that I may need to speak to at the city. So Julius will take the next couple of items.
Thanks, Ian.
Hello, Julius here. So David is going to be monitoring in the background. Few comments here just to begin with. We'll assume that this material is taken as read, so I'm not going to go through this in great detail at the front end unless there's specific questions.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Yep.
So a few quick updates before we get into the financials. Lakeshore Bridge, as you all know, that project is now underway with the demolition having been completed. And we've had a few little challenges with some noise complaints, and we've had a bit of damage with some falling debris onto a vehicle, but other than that, it's moving actually ahead of plan. The east half of the bridge has been now removed entirely. Now, we've also had the delivery of the east half of the Commissioner Street Bridge, so that's now on site. We've carried forward with the excavation according to plan. So with that overview, we are generally following through the plan on the financials as has been shown in the past with no material changes.
Julius, can I just get you to clarify on the falling debris on the vehicle? Yes. First of all, nobody was injured, right, on that one?
No, no one was injured.
And the investigation hasn't identified where that debris came from, right? Or is that correct?
That's correct. We don't know if it was from our material or something coming from somewhere else. So the investigation continues, but no one was hurt. There was a back window of a vehicle damaged. The only reason I mentioned it was it did make the media.
Yeah, Jamie? I just wanted to clarify, just to the board members, that nobody was hurt, and the police are investigating. We're not sure where it came from. It could have, it could have come from the project, but it could have also come from vehicles or other like trucks carrying materials, etc. So,
George, so I'll just say that the police actually concluded their investigation and really came to no conclusion whatsoever. Ellis Dawn is investigating. Ellis Dawn has been reviewing, and obviously over the weekend when we shut down, they reviewed all of the vents. I spoke directly to the gentleman whose car was damaged. Ellis Dawn will be making recompense for the damages to his vehicle.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Just as an update.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to, first of all, just clarify the individual wasn't hurt. So that was the first thing.
Okay, I didn't want to throw things off, but I did mention it because of the media coverage on it. Thank you.
David, that was going to be my question, regarding that. So I did see it in the media. It was very alarming. Thank goodness nobody got hurt. I had a question. You said that the work has been done. So if it had come from the work we were doing, that risk is past. Is that correct? Because it's been dismantled. I haven't been down to that part of the city.
No, not 100%. The risk has been addressed because we've had the contractor ensure that there's no loose debris on any of the remaining vents, and there are 4 remaining west of the Don River. But we actually had the contractor do a thorough analysis, made sure they were cleaned, and actually took photographic records to show they were clean. Part of the question we had was this occurred about 3 days after our work had concluded for the week. No work was being done at the time that this happened, so it was unusual that at that time of day, on that day, that something would have happened. However, we have no evidence to suggest that it didn't happen any more than we have any evidence to suggest that it did. So given that the cost of repair is fairly minor, Ellis Dawn has agreed that they would just go ahead and take care of it. And they for the Ministry of Labor perspective, they also have to make sure that there is an investigation and that the site is safe. So
have we been shut down since
then? No, not at all.
Oh, okay. So they didn't shut us down. Okay.
Yeah, no. The police couldn't find any evidence, so they didn't shut the road down or anything else.
Okay. Are there extraordinary measures that we should be taking, or it sounds like you've already done that? You had kind of the vents investigated, photographed.
Yeah, we've done that.
Okay, thank you.
There's actually a flyover video that was put together by the demolition contractor that shows these conditions, which is quite good as well. So it does show the material being cleaned off. Moving forward with the deck, then, from a financial standpoint and a summary standpoint, we remain moving forward to plan. Any questions on this? No, let's move to the next slide.
There. Keep going, thanks.
Thank you. Again, budget status remains. As you can see, expenditures are moving forward quickly. The overall program, has had considerable funding put in place. We can see the overall program progress is significant on the project. I'll leave it at that. From a risk standpoint, our risks remain in the same priorities that we had previously. So no material changes there, with the exception of ongoing challenges with our friends at Hydro and Enbridge. But I think that's familiar to everybody. Schedule status, again, all moving to plan. Next.
Julius, Kevin, if that's okay, I just have a couple questions.
Yep.
Under the budget, Julius, I noticed that site-wide municipal infrastructure is a 57% increase in the projected cost over the original budget. Is that taking into account this whole Enbridge thing and all the kind of a worst-case scenario in terms of assuming the cost?
Really, generally speaking, does the highest. Sorry,
Julius, let me answer that one. Sorry. It does account for Enbridge, but okay. Jeannie, it's been above the 30% budget since at least 60%. So the biggest actual impact is the ground improvements on that particular project. So literally tens of millions of dollars in additional costs that weren't initially budgeted that we've identified. So that's why it's reflecting as substantially higher than the original budget. But as I say, it has been for some time.
Okay. And my other question is, sorry.
By the nature of this type of program, our highest risk is in the ground, and that's reflecting it.
Okay, well, I understand. You start digging and you find things you didn't know were there. My other question is regarding the schedule risk. I'm just wondering, among all of these risks, a lot of them look like they're kind of out of our control. We're relying on other kind of third parties, or how are we feeling about that? Or we're either relying on weather and or kind of third parties like utilities.
No, I think generally speaking, everything is working to plan, and we plan for these conditions as we've developed the schedules with Elliston. So in most cases, I think we're in very good shape. We do have risks relative to hydro, relative to Enbridge, those two in particular, because we do need approvals from them as we proceed with work. So they do remain a risk, but we're managing those.
Okay, so none of these are keeping you up at night?
No.
Okay.
David, maybe.
No, that's his dog.
I was going to say.
If you're not worried, I'm not going to worry then.
I was going to say, well, maybe not you, Julius, but a couple of us.
Thank you.
All right. But yeah, I do feel good and I do sleep fine. Next. Thank you. So our dashboard remains, again, generally consistent with what you've seen in the past. There are no material changes here. I'll leave it at that. And we've talked about schedule risk, and we've identified where those are. We are carefully watching the establishment of the plantings. That is a risk item that we're looking at very carefully because you've got time windows that are allocated to get this planting done. So that will remain a risk item. We're doing our best to manage that. Yes, Jenny? No? Okay, next. So we've touched on key tasks completed, but just to cover off the key ones, I did talk about the Lakeshore Bridge demolition that's having mobilized and is actually moving ahead of plan right now. We did
sorry.
get the
Michael,
yes.
Did you have a question there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a general comment, and I'm sure it'll come up later, but just kind of getting management's view on the current impact of COVID and how you guys are planning for that over the next quarter or two, just to get an update. I'm sure it's going to be somewhere along the line. You can't have a meeting without talking about it, but just given we were talking about some of the...
There is a separate COVID report.
Yeah, so we'll get to, Michael, we'll get to that. There's when we get to the risks, we'll be speaking to COVID, so we'll answer that for you later.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so we did touch on this earlier on, which were the major items that were accomplished through this period. Any questions on this? No? Okay, next. And so we've got some site photos of conditions. We can see the riverbed in the upper corner. Yes.
We've got more photos. Why don't we just move on from here?
Okay. If you do have any questions tied to these photos, let me know. You. And here we've covered off the contingency drawdown. Again, we're keeping this updated, but there's no material changes, with the exception of sorting through the process with Toronto Hydro, which is ongoing. So we'll update when we have a clearer position on that.
I think Jeannie has her hand up, I believe.
Yes.
Julius, hi. I just had a quick question. So it looks like we've got 35% of our contingency remaining and 28% of costs yet to be committed. And I did the quick math, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like the contingency left works out to 13% on the uncommitted costs. Is that kind of in line with kind of what's to be expected at this stage? And do we feel comfortable with that, or are we trying to increase our contingency a bit more?
Well, we're always trying to increase the contingency. We've had some success with some tenders. We've had some losses on some tenders. Overall, we've remained balanced and we've been able to hold to this number, Toronto Hydro being the wild card on this item. So we're seeing what can be done to recover some money there, which is being dealt with at a city level and a senior management level between Waterfront Toronto and Hydro.
Okay, but we feel comfortable. Yeah, so we feel comfortable at about 13% right now.
As best we can, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Yeah. I'm working two screens, one to help my eyes here. So next page, please. So this is simply a contingency tracker that's providing further updates on individual items as to where funds are going. Jeannie?
Oh,
Jeannie,
sorry, I just forgot to put my hand down.
Yeah,
Do that.
Okay, next.
Charmaine, I don't know if you can make the chart a little bit bigger for some of us older guys.
I didn't want to say it.
Thank you.
This is just a summary of the a summary of last month's contingency utilization. So it shows where we were at 90%, what we were carrying versus what the approved amount was, and you can see that it we actually saved 3.6 million on contingency drawdown from what we were carrying in the 90% in May 2021.
So this demonstrates the proactive efforts.
Yeah, I think David, you, Julius, your team's done really well. I think, you know, are we comfortable? Would we be more comfortable with the bigger contingency? Yes, but I think we're not alarmed by what we have, Jeannie.
Yep, keep up the great work, guys.
We're doing our best. Next. David, any comments on this one?
No, this is just the June version of the same chart, where this one shows that we actually went over a little bit in June from what was carried.
And I think David pointed out in a previous meeting, we are seeing material costs starting to come down again. So, you know, some of those pressures that we saw earlier this year are starting to come back down. So that's promising, at least.
Okay. Next. This is an overview on the Lakeshore Bridge program. Again, we've touched on this at a high level, but we are working to plan. We do have our approvals in place, and work is proceeding as expected. There are some traffic congestion issues. We have had a few bumps relative to mobilization, but have engaged with the city overall in communicating how we get through these items, and work with Ellis Don to rectify any bumps that may have happened in the first couple of days. So it's moving well.
So would it be fair to say some of the challenge, and David, you can speak to this because I think the mayor raised this in an earlier discussion, It's not just the road closures for our project, but the fact that other roads happen to be closed at the same time, and that it has complicated things, right?
Yeah, George, I think that contributes to it. When we did the traffic analysis, we took into account all of the planned other closures that the city was looking at, including Jarvis Street, for the Jarvis Street sewer and water main. There were some unexpected ones like Enbridge at Cherry and Lakeshore, but they'll be done in another week. I think it really boils down more to, when we removed 2 ramps from the Gardner Expressway, that means all those vehicles that were initially getting on the ramps at Gardner are now getting on the ramps at Jarvis. So it's really unavoidable. We've done what we can, but you're just handling more traffic volume with fewer places for them to go, and it's going to get worse. And we really need to, we need to recognize that is the case. We've done what we can, work with the city. We'll continue to do other things like potentially, changing turn restrictions, changing signal timing, and we've done some of that already. So we'll keep tweaking the system, but we really can't add any other relief areas. There's work that's happening, and our work is happening.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So just to remind everyone, the ultimate solution of this will be the widening of the Lakeshore and extension of the Lakeshore Bridge, and the construction of new ramps up to the realigned Gardner to the west of the Don River.
I'm just going to add, maybe for Drew's benefit and as a reminder for us at cocktail parties, when we're asked why did Waterfront Toronto take this project on, and why are we sort of branded with it now?
Well, the biggest issue was the stability of the Gardner foundations. The city needed to pull down the ramps one way or the other to get the Gardner realignment done, but on our end, we had to extend the Lakeshore Bridge to the west, and north-south ultimately done by the city to follow. So the two issues were the stability of the Gardner overhead, which is on splayed piles below the bridges that we're working on. And then the second was the integration with the broader program with the city.
But Kevin, to your point, I think I tried to explain, it made sense from the city's perspective, since we were doing work in the area, to try to integrate the projects together. So David's team has taken that on since we were doing work in the area. But Dave, I don't know if David has to speak on the other item, but I don't know if you want to add to that, David.
Well, in fact, our other item just got approved at infrastructure, so I'm good. Okay. No discussion at all. Yeah, I think, there are a number of reasons we did it. One, primary was health and safety. For us to be excavating below, the Gardner ramps, having to underpin and reinforce the Gardner ramps as we excavated the river in and around the bents, what is a health and safety issue. There, a life safety issue. We really didn't want to be doing that on underneath an active Gardner. Secondly, we couldn't widen the bridge when we lengthened it because of the Gardner bents. They are in the way. In order to be able to do the entire bridge work in one operation, the ramps had to be relocated. Extending the bridge is part of the Portland's flood protection work. So we recommended this, and we recommended we do the work, in fact, because we are well placed to do the work. We have a contractor that can do the work, and it put the work in under our responsibility and within our control, meaning we weren't having to wait for someone else to do this before we could go in and lengthen the bridge, because that is a key component of achieving flood protection. If we were reliant on anyone else, I'd be very, very leery and concerned about our ability to meet schedule for our part of the work. And ultimately, what we're doing is going to reduce the amount of traffic disruption because we're doing all of this work in the course of 3 years, whereas had we done a lengthening and then the city came back and demolished the ramps and did a widening, it would have created another 3 years of traffic impact after we were done. So a total of 6 years of traffic nightmare as opposed to what we're doing now. So there are a lot of really good reasons why we did this. why we recommended doing this, and why we wanted to be responsible for doing this.
Drew?
Yeah, and thanks for taking it to a larger kind of ambit. I appreciate it, just jumping into this. So I kind of wondered this in the context of, I sort of assumed that we were brought into it in part because, you know, the work that's going on now and will continue to go on is fundamental to kind of the larger kind of perspective of the naturalization of the Don. My question is not just about the work that we're talking about now, but I think, David, you just got to the wider frame of the next 3 years and the entire project of, I think, what was known back 5 years ago as the compromise solution, which includes the connection between the Lakeshore and the Gardiner, we all know well, moving north, which helps us in terms of land north of that naturalized Don. Do we continue an involvement in, you know, in some of the roadworks in some fashion as we are right now with regard to, in particular, taking down that ramp to Logan and all the work surrounding that?
We don't know at this stage. I think it may be a little unlikely that we're going to be responsible for the Gardiner work. I think the city will continue that, just as they did with the rehab work with ACON over from Jarvis to Cherry. They're going to want to, you know, retain responsibility for the, you know, the compromise or the hybrid 3 solution, which is to move the ramps further north. I think we'd like to be involved in ensuring that Lakeshore Boulevard when it's relocated is, you know, done appropriately. However, you know, from a construction standpoint, it may not be feasible for us to be doing Lakeshore while the city is doing the Gardiner above us. No final decisions made on it, Drew. You know, I'm not sure the city's interested in handing it over, and I'm not sure that we're interested in doing it. And we really haven't looked at it beyond that. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I just wanted to add that while David's right on the construction side, we're actually very involved in the Lakeshore rebuild from the design side. So we're actually leading for the city a whole public realm process that came out of the EA, actually. So when the decision was made to pursue the hybrid option for the Gardiner, there were a lot of unhappy stakeholders who said, well, then what are you going to do for experience on Lakeshore? So we've been preparing a whole series of plans, urban design guidelines, and even piloting some of this public realm ourselves to lead the way on what the ultimate rebuild of Lakeshore will look like. So it's more like a real urban boulevard and less like a, you know, highway arterial, which is basically how it's designed now. So we're actually quite involved on the planning and design stage. We're less involved in what they're actually doing with the Gardiner, but we do have an interest in the final alignment because the lands around it, all the way in the east, are a future precinct that's meant to kind of mirror the work we're doing on Villiers Island, so that the Keating Channel becomes a two-sided urban canal. So I just wanted you to know we're actually quite involved on the planning and design side.
I'm glad to hear that, because in a way it's kind of the front porch from the north to everything else that we're doing, right? So doing that right with everything that's going to the south makes a heck of a lot of sense. I'm glad we're involved.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, if Villiers Island looked out on the Gardiner that's there today, it would be kind of a lost opportunity.
Yeah. So I think, Kevin, to the question that you raised, the decision on the hybrid option was a city decision. We just actively pursued doing the, assisting, I guess, on the work to mitigate any of the risks, as David pointed out, and as Chris pointed out, we continue to do design work to try to make this as attractive an option from a design perspective as possible.
And Jeannie, you had a question?
Yes, just a question. I was just reading over the risks. How are we feeling about these risks in terms of, are they just kind of like the usual, we're just disclosing them, or are we concerned about any of them? It looks like, again, we're relying on other people getting back to us in a timely manner on permits, et cetera. And what's the timing on being able to confirm the budget risk?
I don't think we're very concerned about risks on this project at all, Jeannie. The budget risk, remain, as with any project, will remain till the end of the project, because it is, like all of our projects, involved with, working in the ground, working in roads where utilities are not, the drawings may show, city drawings may show something, the as-built drawings, or composite utility plans show one thing, and what's actually on site is something different. So we're actually digging 130 holes on Lakeshore Boulevard to try to confirm that the utilities are in the right place before we start getting into the work. We'll do everything we can, but those risks will come. From a budget perspective, we've still got 27 million in contingency, almost as much contingency on this project remaining as on the Portland's flood protection project. So there's a substantial.
I don't want to hear that.
Well, it's okay. It just means we've got way more.
I know.
This isn't keeping me up at night. I'm sleeping like a baby.
All right. And how much flexibility do we have, David? I mean, the great thing, I'm glad that we're controlling this in terms of timing. Like how much, because I know a lot of this work is kind of, we need to do it right before we can move on with some stuff with the Portland's project. Like how much slippage do we have or flexibility on timing?
We've got, because the work at the Dawn roadway is essentially complete, this is not going to affect our Portland's flood protection project at all. Everything we're doing east of the Dawn roadway, we've really got, we've got until the end of 2024 to complete that. I don't think it's going to take that long. So,
super.
I don't think we have any real concerns from a schedule or budget perspective on the Lakeshore Boulevard project. The biggest risk was the demolition, and it's 95% complete.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the other thing, David, we should just point out is we have regular meetings with the city to go over all of these issues, and they've been great at trying to resolve issues with us.
Yeah, and they are, for sure.
So the next few pages cover off our standard report addressing this particular program. I think we've covered off this report already with these discussions. Charmaine, if you can go forward a few pages.
Okay. Charmaine? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The procurement report, is there items to highlight from this?
Lisa?
Taking it as read?
Well, actually, yeah, I think you take it as read. I think two of the items, the AECOM Canada and the Toronto Waterfront Development Studios, those are not really procurements, and they're probably not really sole source. They were not competitively procured because they're essentially contributions that other agencies have required of us. So for the AECOM Canada, Metrolinx required that their consultant AECOM review all of the material that we have in the sediment management area because of its proximity to the rail corridor. So we couldn't go out and find our own consultant. This is Metrolinx's consultant. Similarly, the development studios, we were asked by Create TO, who leases this space to the Pinewood, essentially, to make this contribution, due to the work that we're doing on Commissioner Street, to the studio. So we elected to do that. So while we're reflecting them as quote unquote sole source, they're simply being reflected here because they couldn't be and they weren't competitively procured payments. So I think that's really all we wanted to bring up here. And I don't know if there are any questions. Otherwise, I think we can take this as read.
David, I just have a quick question regarding Jevon and Associates. The line, without this person's involvement, the organization could be exposed to substantial risk. Don't like to read stuff like that. I see this is only a 9-month contract. So, is there a plan B? Like, what if the guy gets hit by a bus? So, God forbid. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too, hypothetical.
Hypothetical. I mean, there is a risk. This is Kevin Newsom, by the way. I'll just point out.
Oh, Kevin he's no longer with us.
Kevin is retired. And is retired. Yes, he's of retirement age. Unfortunately, we all get there. So we've managed to get Kevin to agree to be available to us for a couple of things. One is he's so integral on Keysight and the RFP for developers. We wanted him to continue to be involved. He's also working with us on the succession plan. So Betty Leung is the director of procurement, and Kevin is providing transition oversight and mentoring, I guess, is the best way to put it for Betty. So that's why we've got Kevin. And if we don't necessarily draw on Kevin's services as much as we provided for in the agreement, then the costs will be what the cost will be. But we wanted to make sure that until the end of this year, we had Kevin, fiscal year, we had Kevin available because of Keysight, and to ensure that we had a good transition succession plan for the procurement development or director position. Okay. And we're not refilling Kevin's position, by the way. Betty will move into is in the director role, and that will be the leadership role in that part of the organization.
Okay, great.
But Jeannie, to your point, one of the things that are in all of our senior executive performance contracts is looking at succession planning, so that we minimize the risk with regards to any of the departures in the future.
Okay, great. Thank you.
The risk is mine. I'd have to do way more work if Kevin.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. Where are we at now? Looking back. Anything else on these items, or can we?
I think we can take these ones as read.
Okay. Yeah. Didn't see anything of too pressing or different from our last report. So are we then on to the fundraising action plan? I know we're going to cover some of this in the closed session as well, but we can touch on it now. I think, Ian, are you there?
Yes, indeed. I think the important thing to note at this point is we're significantly under budget, and that the planning study is effectively a new strategy and plan that's going through its approval process that will replace the fundraising action plan, which we're working on at the moment. So we're in a kind of a transitionary period, but we're under budget at the moment.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that, obviously, in the closed session. The COVID update. Everyone looks forward to the COVID update.
So can we move to the next slide? Really not a whole lot more to add with respect to the construction, but well, I shouldn't say that. A couple of things to add that aren't actually reflected here. Minimal impact to date from a cost and schedule perspective. We have received notification that our bridge builder in Halifax will be submitting a claim. They've been having some resource issues that have affected them. We don't know what that claim is going to amount to or what they're basing the claim on, but I just want to make a note that we've recently received that notification. Ellis Don has discontinued the on-site testing that they had been doing on a bi-weekly basis, and we are now discussing with them, and they have requested from us our thoughts on Ellis Don instituting a vaccination mandate for the site. So what they are considering is whether or not the potential for shutdown, which still exists if they have any outbreaks. City of Toronto Public Health can shut any work site down, any job, any workplace down, including construction sites, if there is an outbreak. So Ellis Don is concerned about that potentially happening, and the City of Toronto being less accommodating than they may have been in the past. And what is the risk of that happening versus the risk of labor impacts should they implement a vaccine requirement, full vaccination for anyone attending the site, including workers. So they've talked to their sub-trades. Their sub-trades are on board for the most part. They've talked to the industry themselves, so the larger contractors are looking to potentially do this as an industry-wide initiative. There is, however, a potential risk of resources being impacted and the work being impacted. So it's a risk that we need to be cognizant of. we are going to need to advise Elliston what our views are on this at some point, and we wanted to really, I think we wanted to solicit the views of the board. We're not requesting approval or direction, but we are looking for input. Should anyone, any of the directors have any input on this issue? George, did you want to speak to it?
Yeah, I just want to just add, obviously, the concern we always have is safety of all involved. So, we would support whatever mitigates the risk. But obviously, we want to know the impact of the options on both the timing and on the costing. So, as David said, we continue to have discussions with them. We just wanted to open up for your thoughts. We have also required, just as a corporation, our own employees to be double vaccinated. So that, just for your background on what we're doing as a corporation as well. So I'll turn it back to David and solicit your opinions.
Why don't we keep going through the slide deck, mostly taking it as read. Really nothing substantive has changed since the last report, although I would note that one of the claims that was under review was resolved as part of a sort of a global claim resolution with one of the subtrades, and that potential cost has dropped off the table. Next, Charmaine. George mentioned that market volatility, while it remains an issue, is not quite as pressing an issue as it was a few months ago. For example, the cost of lumber had gone up by up to 150%. It's actually down to where it was or below what it was before that volatility hit. But steel and labor continues to potentially be higher. Depending on, of course, the sector you're in, we've seen some increased cost where we've got steel requirement, but for landscaping, for example, that we haven't seen the same sort of increases in either labor or commodities. Next, carry on. I think this is all as it has been for some time. Next. Again, no impacts on any of the projects that we're currently doing. This is just a breakdown of the costs that we've identified to date. Carry on. Claims that are under review continue to be under review, along with the claim that isn't listed there from our bridge contractor. Next. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa and then turn it over to comments or questions.
Yeah, on this one, there's no real change from our previous reporting. We're still experiencing some adverse impacts on our parking revenues, particularly in the springtime. Over the summer, we had excellent results in terms of revenues from parking revenues. So there has been a dip related to the first quarter in terms of the spring, and then we've continued to see some savings in operating costs from the remote work situation. So really kind of a continuation of what we've recorded previously.
So if there are any thoughts or comments on what we've discussed on COVID, Michael?
Yeah, just thanks for that. What's the current thinking on remote working, and when do you envision, I guess, kind of going back, if at all at this stage, having more staff in the offices? Just curious.
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. So Michael, we're already coming back. So senior executive team is back. We engaged with our government partners. The province has come back much more aggressively. Their senior management team is back September 13th. Their staff are coming back 2 to 3 days over the next month or so. I've basically engaged with our senior executive team and shared with our staff that we expect them to come back 1 day a week for the next little while, and then in October we'll see about whether they come back 2 or maybe 3 days every 2 weeks. So we are monitoring the situation from a public health, but from two perspectives. We do want to get people back and collaborating with our partners in a safe way. So we're making sure that we have a double vax policy, so everybody coming into the office will have some assurances that that there's double vaccinated, or if there's an exemption, we'll take that into account. So we've already started. People have been in the office, to be frank, even myself, a couple of days a week for most of the time. So I know Ian and Cameron and others have been in. So we're slowly coming back, but we will continue to monitor. So not as aggressive as the province is requiring. Feds in the city are starting to get their people back as well. So we're going to take it slow but sure over the next couple months.
Just to follow up, George, thanks for that. Have any employees had COVID or any instances of, I guess, outbreak in Waterfront Toronto at all?
I can't get into all the details. There are people that got COVID, but they got it from the community's perspective at home, and it was during the remote work. So, you know, they would report into us. We have, you know, our screening process. So anybody who's gotten COVID has not exposed anybody into the office. So we have a strict policy with regards to making sure that people are screened before they come in.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Okay, let's keep moving. Since we're a tiny bit behind, we're going to go, are we going to go to the internal audit update now?
Yeah, and because we are a little bit behind, I'm going to take the report as read. Veronica Vila from MNP is with us. I would just invite her to provide a couple of highlights about the work to date and where we're at. Veronica?
Yeah, sure. So currently working on the resource and succession planning review over the summer months, where we conducted the majority of our field work for this. So having workshops with the senior management team, interviews with all the members of the senior management team and others, as well as reviewing HR documents and having a skills and capabilities inventory survey released to the staff. So we're really right now in our reporting phase, which will be over the month of September, and we plan to bring the final report and our observations and recommendations to the farm committee at the next meeting.
Okay, great. That's great. Now, next is, I think, over to you, George, on this exciting initiative on the Volunteer Corps.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So just a brief update with regards to, and I've updated the Human Resource Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee on this idea as well. I'd spoken to Steve months ago about the prospect of creating what I call a volunteer corps. You know, we can call it whatever, Friends of the Waterfront, etc., with the specific objective of, well, three objectives really. One is, and Cameron shared with the committee a survey that was done that really shows the public really is aligned with the mandate of Waterfront Toronto, but really doesn't know who does what with regards to the roles of the waterfront, and therefore doesn't really know much about Waterfront Toronto itself. One of the things I became aware of when I first came aboard is there's a lot of interest in some people in terms of interest in working with Waterfront Toronto. We're a small organization, not a lot of opportunities on the employment side, although we have seen some turnover and some opportunities recently. But we've done a great job of working with the community in terms of working for the community in terms of the development of the waterfront. What we really need to do, I think, to really educate the public on who we are is to actually engage with the public more directly, the community more directly. So work with them on some of the community initiatives. So the thought would be to create a volunteer corps, and we had a bit of a kind of dry run on some of our ideas last month when Tim Cocker reached out to me, and we've talked about this, and he was organizing a bit of a cleanup on the waterfront and asked whether I could get a few people to join, and I joined with a number of staff, and there's some pictures there where we remove the graffiti. You can see Lisa and Kim there, and a group of us were removing graffiti around some of the boxes along the Lakeshore, and you can see before and after, and you can see we also brought her son, and he's been a great help. But it really, first of all, it pumped us up in terms of what we're doing directly with the BIA and with the community. But when we went to Sugar Beach, to clean up, Giovanna's son and I were walking around picking up, along with everybody else, some of the garbage along the beach and literally around some of the umbrellas and people. I had, one woman ask and a gentleman asked who we were, and I pointed out that we were with Waterfront Toronto, and we're working with the BIA, and this is something we wanted to do to help support the community and to clean this up. And they thought it was great. And I pointed out that we were looking at the prospect of creating a volunteer group that would do things like this in the community. And the woman was extremely excited and actually wanted the phone number to sign up right away. And I said, well, we haven't even talked to the board, but we hopefully will launch this soon with their support. And the woman at the umbrella right next door said, and I've overheard, I'd love to join this as well. So in talking with the staff and then talking with the HR GSR committee, there was a lot of support for this initiative, and Steve was very supportive as well. I just bring it to your attention. Really, the intent would be, again, working more directly with the community, educating the community on who Waterfront Toronto is, and I think it's much easier than just putting out annual reports and 5-year plans. There's a lot of interest, including, I have 2 sons who they and their friends would be happy to join in, just as Giovanna's son did, and others in the community that live in the community told me they'd love to work with us. So this is an opportunity for us to launch this. It also creates, stronger links with the community. Probably more diverse links with the community in terms of the people that we normally engage in our stakeholder engagement. And it also creates a bit of a pipeline, as I pointed out. People are interested in the prospect of working with Waterfront Toronto, and it gives us a chance to meet these people. And the observations I got from the committee was they were all supportive. They pointed out this can't be done on the side of a desk. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right. The idea was to do this maybe 2 or 3 events a year, so not something that would be overwhelming. But really, this was just to bring this to your attention. Seek out any comments that you have. I know, Jeannie, you joined us for the earlier conversation, but I do think it's very exciting. People I've talked to thought that the idea was great and that they would like to get engaged. And I think it's just something that we can do to bring better awareness of what Waterfront Toronto does for the community of Toronto and for the province and for the country. So open it up for any comments that you might want to share. Or not.
Well, great initiative, George. I think it's great for our branding and city engagement. So I think it's a great idea and look forward to implementing it. I'm not sure that this is something that requires our approval. It's more for information, correct?
That's correct, Kevin. It really was just to get your thoughts and also to make you aware as we're going to put some notices out. I just want to make sure the board knew of what we were doing, why we were doing it. And hopefully, seek out any advice that you could share. And we got some good advice, and I think we're all on the same page. We want to engage them, but we need to make sure we do this right.
Michael's hand is up. I don't know whether there's another. I see. Put a comment in the chat, Michael. I don't know whether you had something else you want to say. Nope. We lost it.
Yeah, no, sorry, I have a bad connection, so I just put a comment in there. Great initiative, and I've been having some trouble with my hand here, so hopefully it's off.
Yeah, me too. I put something in the chat. Can people, anyway, I find Teams, anyway, it's a great idea, George, and I'm happy to wander down to the waterfront anytime and help out.
And George, I shared my thoughts at the Human Resources meeting last week, but Kevin, just to let you know, yeah, I think this is wonderful. Help expand our reach as well, and will support our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives moving forward as well. And hopefully, like I said, reach out to kind of perhaps people on the waterfront and beyond who aren't as engaged with us currently. So I think it's a great initiative.
Yeah, and I will reach out to board members when we do have an event to solicit your attendance too, if you'd like to join us. And I know, Jeannie, you indicated you'd be very supportive of kind of helping lead on this initiative.
I'm great at cheering people on.
Great.
Drew, I'm getting you down there with a shovel, my friend.
Okay, let's keep moving, team. I've got David on my agenda next for the ELFP update. Go ahead, David.
Thanks. I've relocated into the boardroom. I'm here now. So just going to give you some progress updates. You can see here the excavation update, ice management area at Don Greenway and Central River Valley, all complete. Working on the elbow, about 60% of the way through there, looking to be complete in the next month and a half to make those final connections. Next slide. Just an overhead of the site. We do these on about every 2-week, 3-week basis to show the progress. You can see the areas we're working in, which is essentially from the very north to the south, east to the west on this graphic. Let's go to the next slide. First item, big news last month was the arrival of the Commissioner Street Bridge east half. So that has arrived from Dartmouth and has been moved to the bridge location, although it's not currently sitting on its structure. Can we go on to the next slide? While they do some work to splice the two ends of the bridge, or two halves of the bridge together before they place it on its concrete foundations. Next slide. You can see the activity in the Central River Valley. The work you see right in front of you with that large Volvo truck is the levee clay core. So on the right side of that structure is one of the wetlands in the river valley. On the left side, you can see that stone path is actually the river bottom. So that's what the final finish of the river will look like at the bottom, just very large, varying sizes of river stone. Next. The bridge in the background. Here we are starting to see some finishes and structure in place. So this is the root wad crib wall. These trees have been brought to the site with their roots intact. They are then essentially chained down to the stones that you see in between them in a grid pattern to create a very, very strong structure that is happening at the bends in the river where the volumes and velocity of the river water are faster. We don't want the river to meander out of its current channel or its constructed channel, so these are structures that are to keep it in. The root wads themselves will be exposed and become fish habitat in the river itself, and so that these structures will be used at the two places where the river bends as it heads out to the inner channel. Next. Here you can see the ice management area, excavation complete, the sand layer mostly down. The risk management measures will start here in the next couple of weeks for environmental protection. And then this area will be finished largely with very large armor stone finishes to protect the banks from the ice that will come down from the Don River. Next. The activity in the elbow area, very large amount of excavation going on, the final excavation. We're also finding substantial concrete foundations where, you know, we knew they were there. However, they're much bigger, much deeper, much larger than any of the buildings would suggest they should have been. So that's where we are, however, crushing and reusing all of that material on site. Next. Here we have the, you can see the Cherry Street alignment with the work happening in the background being the installation of wet utilities, so sewer mains, water mains, in advance of the dry utilities like hydro and the telecoms happening, and then eventually in the next couple of months the actual roadways themselves, Cherry Street commencing to be open next spring, at least in a temporary basis. Next. This is the Cherry Street South Bridge alignment. You can see we have now excavated the mouth of the river to the west plug. So that's the mouth of the Polson Slip. We've removed the dock wall, excavated to where the Cherry Street South Bridge will be. So these are, you can see the abutments and the caissons that will support that bridge. It is a single span bridge that will arrive via barge in early November. And here on Cherry Street, we are installing ground improvements. So these are rigid inclusions. Essentially, we're putting down a grid of concrete columns to bedrock. We'll create a essentially a concrete table or a concrete platform, and then the road itself will be constructed on that platform. What you're seeing was the original road elevation is about 6 feet lower than the future road elevation, because that bridge, you can see the base of the bridge is actually about 6 feet higher than the truck to its immediate foreground. So Jeannie, those were the costs that I was mentioning that were impacting on the site-wide utilities work predominantly. MT35, so this is the dock wall at the inner harbor. We are doing some reinforcing of that to ensure that we can construct Promontory Park, and specifically construct the promontories, add that additional volume of soil to the parks to create the contours that the designers are looking for. So we need to do some dock wall reinforcing in order to do that, to enable that work to happen. Next. And of course, the Fire Hall 30 relocation happened in the end of July. You can see in the foreground the original foundations for the building. It has been moved back to its new location, and the foundations are being constructed or connected. The building itself is being connected to the foundations that were constructed for it in that location. I won't go through this, but you can see that you can review this, or if you have any questions on it, see the various areas and what is currently happening in those areas. The site. And I won't get into a whole lot of detail here, other than to note that we're about 76% procured from the construction perspective, with about 228 million left to go. This was as of June, so it's actually somewhat better than this. We would have awarded a number of the contracts reflected in the work in progress at that time. And I think we should just carry on through all of these. I don't want to provide, Julie's provided a bit of an update of what has been accomplished, as I did with respect to the photographs. So unless you've got questions, we do have some detail here as to the current status. From a complaints, whoop, a little too far. As much as I'd like to just pass the complaints one, we should reflect this. At the time, we hadn't started the demolition work, so complaints were fairly minor, and not too many of them, mostly regarding noise and dirt, which of course Ellis Dawn is addressing, and addressing the people who raise these issues, advising them what we're doing to address their concerns. Next, so at our next meeting, we'll provide some additional information on the issues that will have surfaced with respect to the Lakeshore work in the Gardiner. Largely, obviously traffic and cycle related. I will note, however, that while we did have quite a number of concerns raised with us in our first weekend of work, very few calls or issues over the last weekend. And we will be issuing a summary of the status of the work, as well as the any of the issues that came up and how we address them. That will go out later today. Jeannie, question? Comment?
David, just a quick question regarding the complaints. I mean, it's amazing that there's so few, but how are we managing them? We just contact them directly and speak with them, or?
Some we are speaking with, some we are simply responding to with information to address their concerns. I mentioned that I had spoken to the gentleman whose car had been damaged, spoke to him directly. Some others we've contacted to try to understand a little more what their concerns are. But we are addressing all of the concerns directly and responding directly to anyone who's reached out to us or to the councillor. The councillor is sending all of the correspondence that she's received to us for a response as well. So
okay, great. Yeah, it's amazing that there's so few, considering the scope of the project. And two quick fun comments. I was at Cherry Street Barbecue recently. I'm very happy it's still open. So to my fellow board members, if you haven't been, go. And I hope that are they going to be able to stay open the whole time, or?
They are. They're actually, Larry, I happen to see Larry on site, who runs the barbecue. They are closed this week, but for their own purposes, they wanted to take a break. So we're taking the opportunity. We're doing, and Ellis Dawn are coordinating very closely with them. So we took the opportunity of their closure to do some of the work right in front of their building. They're very happy with us, doing that. And yeah, they're doing really well. I mean, obviously they've got
construction workers eating.
Yeah, they got a built-in clientele that I think is keeping them pretty busy. So yeah, so
best
they're doing
barbecue in town. Go if you haven't. And another quick comment. I had the pleasure of going out on a kayak, so I did a little kayak inspection of your work, Julius and David, and it looks good. I kayaked the Polson Slip, the Keating Channel, went up the Parliament Slip. It's interesting. It's a very different perspective when you're actually like physically in the water. But it all looked very impressive. It looks good.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Jeannie, to your point, that's one of the reasons we wanted to take the board on the water, to get that perspective from the water. So, people get a chance to see that tomorrow. Not the same as a kayak, though.
But if anyone wants to go kayaking, we can go out.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I know Ian and a couple others constantly go out kayaking in the area. I'd be happy to join in the future. Oh,
that would be fun. We still have a few weekends left where it should be okay.
Yeah, sounds good. All right.
Okay, excellent. Is that your report then, David?
That is, thank you.
Okay, over to BTY now. What do we have to add to the materials there? I'm not sure if Joanne or Lisa, who's going to handle this one?
Hey, hi everybody. My name is Luis. I'm part of the BTY team working hand to hand. Joanne had a personal situation and she cannot attend today, so I'm going to be here in her behalf. So we don't really have major concerns. We have been closely discussing with David, Alma, John, and Michelle, who have kindly gave us all the documentation that we needed. So far we actually have no concerns about the budget. We had some comments about the contingency, but they are really minor. We don't think right now that as a potential issue. Same with the schedule. We have noticed a couple of fluctuations in some activities, but I think it's still under the mitigation stage, so no major concerns from our side. The only two things that we commented that has been discussed a couple of times here are potential costs due to the negotiations with Toronto Hydro and Enbridge on the relocation of the pipes. But to be fairly honest, right now at this moment, we have been closely monitoring all the documentation provided. All the things that has given to us at this moment do not show any major concern from our side. I don't know if anybody has any questions for us, but we're actually, as I mentioned right now, it seems quite decent, on track, and no major concerns.
Okay, thanks for filling in, Luis, and those are the type of reports we like from our independent monitors, so thanks very much. I think the last item is the, before we go into closed session, if I'm not missing anything, is the appointment of the external auditors.
That's right, Kevin. And this item is submitted for approval and recommendation to the board for approval. And so part of the mandate of the Farm Committee, as you're likely aware, is to recommend the appointment of external auditors to the Board of Directors for approval. You may recall when the Farm Committee last met in May, we did mention that the existing contract for external audit, which was a 5-year term, was expiring at the end of that fiscal year, ended March 2021. So over the summer, we competitively procured our external audit requirements for a initial 3-year term with the option to extend for 2 more years, making it potentially a new 5-year term. We received 4 compliant submissions, and as per our procurement practice, we had a team from finance, accounting, and program controls evaluate and consensus score all of the proposals. And based on that evaluation process, management is recommending that BDO Canada LLP be reappointed as Waterfront Toronto's external auditors. One of the key strengths in the BDO proposal was the use of technology, data analytics, and AI in their audit approach. And I will note and highlight for the committee that BDO's has been Waterfront Toronto's external auditors for 10 years. And while there's no requirement for not-for-profit organizations to rotate either audit firms or audit partners, given this tenure and the potential of perception for familiarity risk, I wanted to just highlight 3 things. The first is that there has been at least 1 lead audit partner rotation in those 10 years. The second is that the staff, BDO staff doing the audit work, as well as the quality review partner, are rotated at least every 2 to 3 years, resulting in a fresh set of eyes on a regular basis for those actually doing the work. And then the third is that BDO, as part of their approach, use unpredictability testing. And that's an approach that goes below materiality to test areas that might not otherwise be looked at, and to add an area of unpredictability so that they're not constantly familiar with us as an audit client. So given that, George, do you want to add something?
Yeah, you know what, Lisa, I just wanted to also maybe add, we are probably one of the most audited organizations of all agencies. We've had, I believe, Lisa, correct me, over 70 audits. So we have the benefit, obviously, of being scrutinized from all perspectives of government, and there have been to date no real issues. So I'll just add that, Lisa, that's all.
Great. Thanks, George. So just in closing, I just wanted to say, given that the procurement evaluation results, together with these 3 factors, I am comfortable recommending the reappointment of BDO Canada as Waterfront Toronto's external auditors, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions there? Thanks for the thoughtful process on this. Any comment before we move to a motion? Hearing none. Could I then have a motion that we reappoint our auditors?
Happy to move. Yeah.
I'll second it, Kevin. It's Jeannie.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And I believe that will close out our open agendas, and we can move into closed session. So could I have a motion to move into closed session?
I'll move that, Kevin. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Go ahead. Seconded. All in favor? Okay. Yep, we're back in session for the approval of the minutes.
I'll move
Seconded.
that.
All in favor? Okay. And I guess the next meeting's in November, but I think with that, I will take a motion to terminate the meeting.
Yep, I'll move that, Kevin.
Oh, thanks, Jeannie. I know it's
great work, guys.
Exactly 11:30, so pulled it in mostly on time. So thanks for everybody at Waterfront Toronto for your efforts today, and we'll look forward to catching up very soon. Lots going on.